Our title of our webinar today is Why Investing in Internal Comms is Good for Business. I am Carla Kath. I am the Marketing Director at Staffbase, and I am a former internal communicator as well. A little bit about us. So at Staffbase, we build a solution that will help you to take your internal comms to the next level to reach your workforce, especially a mobile workforce. And we really feel that that is the wave of the future, and that is the way to make the difference in your organization. And again, internal communicators, our customers, you guys are the ones that are often driving that change and making that change happen. So if we can help by answering some of the questions that you're bringing to the table with us, by partnering with experts, then by all means, we would love to do that. We want you to be successful. And here are those questions. Here are the questions that I think are the most common that we hear, constantly. I think, again, Staffbase, we provide a solution and a channel for internal comms, but then we get these other questions as well. So our customers will ask us, how do I make leaders invest in internal comms? How do I prove to them the ROI? And I think that Jim here will have some answers to those questions. They also say, how do I know what measurement matters to leaders and to my company at large? I think, how to measure and what to measure are two really big questions. And I think they will be different based on your organization and your workforce. But really digging into what and how is what we're going to talk about today. All right. And then who's this other guy on the video? This is Jim Schaefer. If you do not know him, he has been around for a while, and he plays a large role in the internal comms space. He's a business advisor, a leadership coach, an author, speaker, teacher. He's a leader and founder of the Jim Schaefer Group. He's an IABC fellow and a member of SHRM. And Jim, I'm tired after just saying all that. But you've been wonderful in kind of giving me some advice, I think, about topics of interest to our community. And I have found value in everything that you have provided. So I'm excited to hear more today.
Well, thank you, Carla. I especially like your comment about I've been around for a while, because I have been around for a while. And I've had a huge opportunity in my professional career. Starting out when I came out of Kansas State University with a dual degree in political science and communication. My first job was as the press secretary to the governor of Kansas, and I run a couple of congressional campaigns as well, and then I've also led communication functions in a number of private sector organizations. So I've had a lot of fun, and the work that I was at Towers Perrin for 20 years, and now I've had my own firm for about 18 years, and I just have a ball helping work with communication people to improve the performance of their businesses.
Yes, and that doesn't have to be scary, Jim. You're a really fun guy, and I think that you've just shown how we can connect these kind of topics that we talk about that are a little bit, sometimes deemed more, soft. I think the engagement and internal comms, and then how we really take that to being more business focused, and how we take that to the next level. I think, and the answer there seems to be measurement.
That's a big piece of it, Carla.
All right. Let's move forward.
This is a survey that was conducted about a year and a half ago among communication practitioners, primarily internal communication people. And we asked a number of questions to try to identify what their obstacles were to becoming more results focused and to achieve some of the goals professionally that they wanted to achieve. And they said there were three things. First of all, I'm not perceived as adding value. And you can see the 4 different bullet points there about business leaders and how do you get business leaders and to respect you? How do you get them to see the value of communication? Oftentimes it's just, well, now we got to communicate it. And in many cases, we have people who don't have a seat at the table, not brought in early. And this was one of the highest ranking of the obstacles. The other one was on priorities. I don't have the time to do as much as I need to do. I've got a lot on my plate. Too many channels to manage, and the role is reactive versus active. And there's so much that we're doing today about looking at the big bundle of things that we have on our plate and then stepping back and saying, okay, which ones add the most value and which ones don't add value? How do we make sure that we increase the amount of work that adds value and creates results that matter? And how do we reduce the number of things that don't add value? So it's called a value to cost assessment that a lot of people are now using to try to get the bad stuff off their plate and keep a lot of good stuff on the plate. The other is in the area of competencies. I was doing work with a large pharmaceutical a couple of years ago who asked me to take a look at their entire communication function, both internal, external, Marcom, advertising, all of it, and to step back and help them identify how to reshape the communication function. And one of the things that came up was the lack of certain competencies or skills and knowledge needed to be able to run a communication function so that it's results-based and value-based. And we identified 5 different competencies that we're now using in some webinars where we're teaching how to become a strategic advisor, a coach, a counselor, a consultant. The second is all in the area of change management, large-scale change, like what IBM went through with Lou Gerstner when he took over for Acres, as well as small-scale change. How do you do pilots that cause an organization to really kick off and get better and better and better as you do each pilot? Leadership development. How do you move from providing talking points and instead help develop leaders as better communication people so you're building their competencies rather than doing the work for them? Business and financial acumen, something that is kind of scary to a lot of people, the financial side of the business. Well, what is it we do need to know and what is it we don't need to know? And then finally, measurement. We're going to talk a lot about measurement today because that's an important piece of all of this. So one of the things that's very important is that we have the competencies to be able to do the kind of work that we really would like to do.
Right.
Okay, the goal here is to start to move from a cost center where you don't make money for the organization, that you spend, to a value creator, a results and value creator. That is, you create results that are greater than the cost of creating them. And it may be that you help improve customer satisfaction, or you improve safety, you reduce OSHA recordables, or you improve on-time delivery, which causes customers to come to go work with you. And so it's very important that we think about becoming a value creator and a results creator, because what we want is we want the gains we create to be greater than the cost. When that happens, I've found that business leaders are welcoming you and anybody else who can make those kinds of contributions. So let's start thinking in terms of moving from cost center to value creator.
Absolutely. And no, Jim, too, we talked about there's so many solutions out there, and some of them come at a cost. And I think that, using different channels is great to achieve your strategic business goals. But I think you really have to create value and to determine if the channels that you're using are going to meet those goals or not, or if they are just going to be a cost center. At Staffbase with our employee app, we definitely don't want that. I think in working with our customers that have been the most successful, they have come at their projects and looked at an employee app as one, internal solution to achieve a goal. And then that's when they actually saw success because they knew what they were after, from the beginning. So it wasn't just how many employees can you get on board, or how many people are engaged on a daily basis, but really went beyond that to achieve something either related to HR, safety, or operations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me share with you some comments that business leaders have said to me in various different environments. This is a vice president of operations who said this to me just about 3 months ago. He said, our communication people work on the outskirts of town. Now, this is in Chicago, so I wasn't quite sure what he meant. Which suburb was he referring to? Or maybe it was Milwaukee or Racine, Wisconsin or something. But he said, oh, let me just kind of use my metaphor here a little bit. He said, basically, they're kind of out there. They don't really get into, to keep the metaphor going, center city. They aren't involved in the operations of the business, as Carla referred to just a little bit ago. But they're just sort of out there, and they do stuff, but many times the stuff that they do really doesn't have an effect on the business. It's stuff for the sake of stuff. And they're doing a lot of activity, but they're not creating results that are helping us to improve the financial and operating results of the business. So that's one person's perspective. Let's look at the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at a large pharmaceutical. I was asked to do an assessment of the organization. I talked a little bit about this client earlier, a complete communication assessment. I was talking to the head of marketing. And that's, for those of you who may be in the pharmaceutical business, you would refer that to as commercial. It's the commercial side or the marketing side. So here is what he said. He said, our communication people are worried about the wrong things. I tell them about a business problem I'm having, and they trot out the same activities. They worry about click-throughs, opens, mentions, share of voice, awareness, and retweets. I'm worried about sales and gross margin. Where can I find communication people who can help us improve our business? A very important question. And we did a lot of work with him to help that materialize. Let's look at another one here. The first thing our communication people do is decide what tactic they'll deploy, way before they think about the root cause of the problem. I want them to start with the result they need to create, then decide what tactic to deploy. In one particular situation in Orlando, Florida, I was talking with some communication people and their business leaders, and the business leaders said that they came to the employee or the communication people and said, we have people who are stealing out of our warehouse. What can we do about that? And the communication person said, well, we need to get a brochure out about stealing from the warehouse and that we can't do that anymore, blah, 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 blah. And he looked at me and he says, do you really think the lack of a brochure was the reason they were stealing? Why aren't they focused on the root cause of the stealing problem, not getting a brochure out?
Right.
All right. Okay. So what we want to develop is a feeling of strategic influence. And what does that mean? What that means is that communication makes a measurable, we can measure it, contribution to executing the business strategy. I've heard people refer for many, many years to strategic communicator or communication strategy. And what that really means oftentimes is that we communicate about the strategy. Well, there's a difference between communicating about the strategy and communicating to implement the strategy. About the strategy is the historical approach to communication, helping people communicate to change in an organization is the new way that many communication people, especially internal communication, need to be focusing on. Instead of just telling about the strategy, help communicate in order to make the changes occur.
Right.
Okay, we need to step back and look at the communication system, because one of the things that I see is that a lot of communication people focus on formal channels instead of the communication system inside the organization. Let me break that system up a little bit for you. We have two different blocks or two different pieces of it. One is sources of information or communication. The other is content, and that is what information do people need to perform at their absolute peak in an organization. On the sources side, we have three: leaders, as you can see on the left side in the orange, yellow, leaders, systems, and formal channels. Leaders are about leadership, what they say, what they do, who they reward, questions they ask about, and things like that. Irv Hockaday, who I worked with when he was CEO of Hallmark Cards, used to ask people questions like, what are our customers saying about us? What do I need to do to make you the absolute best you can be? And what are our processes doing to help enable us to be a better company? He would always ask questions that were important to the organization. You always knew what questions Irv was going to focus on: process, employees, and customers. And so he would walk away from a meeting and everybody would know exactly what was important. Leaders account for about 60 to 65% of the impact. Very, very high impact on the business. The second are systems and processes, like reward systems and measurement systems and work processes. And that's about 30 to 35%. Now, it's going to vary by industry and vary by company, but those are the orders of magnitude. And then formal channels, which have about 5 to 7, maybe 8% of the impact. So if we're going to manage communication to have a difference made in our organization, we probably ought to be focusing disproportionately on leaders and systems, not to the exclusion of formal channels. They have a role to play, absolutely. But if they aren't also backed up and integrated with leadership development and communication and the systems and processes, it's going to be really, really hard to make a big impact on the organization. The second part of it is the content. In the content, there are 5 different categories. Number 1 is context. What is this all about? What is the customer saying? What's the competitor doing? Etc. What's the world? Why am I being asked to do this? Vision and strategy, or vision is the picture of the future. What's it going to look like when we get there? Think about a 50-piece or 100-piece puzzle. If I give one of you who are listening to this, a picture of the box cover that shows the completed puzzle, and I don't give the other person a picture of it, which one's going to get the puzzle done first? Of course, the one who can see what the future looks like or the results look like. Well, that's what a vision is inside an organization. And third is the strategy. That's how we're going to get there, our plan to get there. Linkage is, what's in it for me? Why should I take this trip with you? And so it's really important that either we have rewards or recognition or other kinds of gains in terms of knowledge that the people have to as a result of their contributions. And then role, what's my role in this game? And then finally, support. What resources am I going to have, whether it's money, capital, tools, education, et cetera, et cetera. When you put all that together, then you're going to have a high-performing organization that creates information for people that helps them make decisions and take actions that then drive business results. If you have gaps over there in those two big buckets, then it's important to find out where that's happening and close those gaps, particularly where it can have the biggest improvement.
Yeah, that's a good one. Jim, we were talking about too, I think some of our other customers that have been the most successful using an employee app as a channel for communication, they have really had that investment from leadership and what they're trying to achieve. And I think that that's an important piece that you mentioned here. They have to be involved in whatever that you're doing to drive those results too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I know the next slide we're going to talk about is communication measures, and you wanted to see if our audience wanted to jump in with any measurement that they are doing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, use the chat box or the chat room there and tell us what you're currently measuring. What are your primary measures? We're going to talk about measurement for a little while here. I'll give you a minute or two here to write down just real fast. What are the kinds of things you measure to determine how well you're doing?
I will tell you one of ours.
Okay.
It's ours is, I'm going to write it here, we do demos of our environment, and so we take a look at the number of demo requests that we have received, and kind of see that as a measurement of success. What do you think about that? You have to tell us.
Well, there are process measures and there are results measures. There are certain things that lead to others. And so if you get a lot of demo requests, you're going to be more apt to have conversions than if you don't get a lot of demo requests, right?
Mm-hmm. Another person says, sadly, we don't formally have any measurements right now, but we're looking at our app to help.
Okay.
That's good as well. I think, again, if you are, one step is taking that leap, but I think having those goals in mind before is probably going to make you the most successful. Right, Jim?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. What if your CEO said, I don't have any measures? I just kind of get up in the morning and go to work. Okay. And then I go home at night. I don't know about whether we did any good or not.
Be a little worried.
Let's take a look at some of these measures here. Let me show you some communication measures. These are communication measures that I've seen in a number of booklets and guides for people, and you can see them for yourselves. I'm not going to read them all, but you know them all: tweets, retweets, page views, word count, timing of content delivery, channel usage, blah 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 blah. And it just keeps going. Now, the question that I'm going to ask of you, if you want to come back to give me an answer, is what do you think of these measures? Do you think that some of them look pretty good, or what do they tell you? What do they tell you when you look at these kinds of measures? Anybody got a thought about that? What don't they tell you?
They tell you a lot about engagement.
Okay, well, let me tell you something. They are interesting to know, but there isn't a single one on there that, if you open up the numbers, tells you the state of your business. Not a single one. They could tell you about engagement if they focused on the 4 elements of engagement: line of sight, that is, I know how what I do affects this; 2, involvement, that is, I can affect it; information, I have the information I need to do what's necessary; and then finally, reward and recognition, that is, if there's something in it for me if I do this. And it's what's called, the classical definition of engagement is discretionary effort. When I have a choice, I will select the right lever to pull in order to cause performance to go up. Employee engagement by itself is not an important measure. Right. It is a means to a measure, so it has to be directed to quality, service, cost, speed, productivity, whatever. Just to have people running around being engaged can really waste a lot of energy. So it's really important when we talk about engagement that we focus it at something, always focusing at something. Now let's take a look at the business measures that I would strongly recommend that all communication people be focused on. You have customer measures, like what's called Net Promoter Score. That's willingness to recommend. We all see those kinds of questions every day when we've completed working with somebody. Second, financial performance measures like revenue growth, gross margin, like the guy at the pharmaceutical that I talked to. Internal processes like project cost variance, order fulfillment, cycle time, handle time. Handle time is what they use typically with first call resolution at a call center or a contact center. Handle time is how long did it take to have this conversation? How long did we handle the call? And then So that's the speed issue, and then first call resolution means, did we get it done in the first call? Those are what are used in a combined way in a call center. So what are these different kind of measures, and how can you, as a communication practitioner, be focused ultimately on these kinds of measures that matter to the business? Each one of these, if you looked at them, unlike the previous group, will tell you a little bit about the state of the business. So consider moving toward these kinds of measures and focusing first on what result do you want to create, then back into it and identify, well, what's the root cause of the problem? Let's make that root cause go away with communication solutions. We'll talk about how one company did that in a little bit.
Yeah. This is a great story, Jim.
There's the company.
Yeah.
They're in Memphis, and this company is called FedEx. This was FedEx Express that we were working on. That's the purple and orange folks. And here's what we did. We had done a communication assessment for FedEx globally, and one of the things that came back was that communication people were telling us, we want to get more involved in the business. We're doing an awful lot of stuff, but it doesn't relate to the business so much. And interestingly, the senior business leaders that I interviewed, the operations leader and all the top people across the top of the Express, they were saying, we want our communication people to be much more involved with us, giving us guidance, giving us counsel. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing this natural marriage occurring between the leadership and the communication people. And I was working with Dave Bronczak, who's now the CEO of FedEx. He was CEO of FedEx Express at the time. And he said, well, how could we create this marriage and make it work on behalf of the results of FedEx? And so we came up with a pilot idea. We went to Los Angeles. We mapped the process of how do we sell exports. We are not we're not in the market for exports. We've been building routes, however, to Asia Pacific and back, and so maybe there's a way to capitalize on that. And so what we did is we brought 15 people together that represented all aspects of the FedEx Express operation in Los Angeles. We identified, and you can see the communication strategy, the kinds of things that we were focused on. We were focused on, as you can see, the communication barriers, work processes, poor sales and operations integration, and things like that. All communication issues that needed to be addressed. We had, in one particular case, there was an incentive for couriers to get, it's called return to station safely, and that was the goal, is to get back the soonest, and then the next soonest, and the next soonest. And so what was happening, though, is that the couriers weren't given the time they needed to be able to sell their business, export business, at the loading dock. And so we had an incentive that was working at cross purposes with our ability to sell more exports. So that communication to couriers was a significant barrier. So you can look there on the right side, and you can see the various communication barriers that we addressed. We set a target for ourselves as about a 7% improvement. Well, you can see the improvement at the bottom there. We got 2,400 new leads. The export volume went up 16% in Los Angeles. We calculated, undercalculated. We were going for 7. The return on investment was 1,447%. As you can see, we had in 5 other locations. And here's how this happened. We had the success at Los Angeles, and then Dave Bronczak said to all of the operations people at FedEx, who wants to be next? You've seen the success. Well, about 25 hands raised because they wanted to make more money, like we were able to help the people in Los Angeles make more money. And so we went to 5 locations. We went to Denver, Seattle, Chicago, Miami, and New York. And we did exactly the same sorts of things there, starting from scratch, that we did out in Los Angeles. And as you can see, we got a $6.1 million sales in 5 locations and a return on investment that was almost 1,700%. Well, Terry Simpson was the manager of internal communication at that time. She has retired. She's retired with a lot of money, probably because of this project. But the fact is the communication people were elevated substantially as a result of creating these kinds of successes. They, after then taking this to 5 locations, then this became the way they did this throughout the world. They did the sales, the export volume improvement at all of their locations, and they had an incredible return. Well, the communication people were the heroes that made a lot of this happen, obviously with the operations people and the sales people, the marketing people as well. It's a fun story.
Yeah, it is a good story. It's a good model, I think, too. I really like that. All right, and here's what they had to say, right?
That's right. So the Scott Fiedler, who was a main player in this whole thing, said, at FedEx, we always had a seat at the table. But when we started creating these kinds of outcomes, our role at the table changed dramatically. It doesn't matter that you're at the table. It matters what you do when you're there. And that's a big lesson, because if you get to the table, then it really is important that you assume a role that is concerned less about communication channels and more about helping the organization manage communication to improve performance and value. I was telling Carla earlier, before we came on the air here, about a situation, a large laboratory that was a company that was acquiring another company. And this is a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. And the communication person was, Ruth was her name, and she was militating for the announcement to come out about the merger on a particular date. And everybody was looking at Ruth and said, we've got more issues than just getting the announcement out. We've got integration issues. We've got lots of different things we've got to talk about financial stuff. Why are you insisting that we get this out on a particular day? And she said, because that's when my newsletter goes out. And everybody kind of looked at her and said, Ruth, the newsletter will get out. Well, we need to get to the important stuff first. The point is, when you get to the table, it's important to do the right things and act in the right way in order to be able to keep your seat at the table.
Absolutely. And these are some other folks who helped to do that, to make that difference, right?
They did. Kristen Kelly had attended one of my workshops, and she went back to her CEO and said, there are all these companies out there who are starting to make the move and doing things very differently, not the traditional activity-based communication, but a more forward-thinking, results-based communication. And so her first project with me was up in Del Mar, New York. We went up there and were able to address some very significant labor issues that they were having. They weren't talking to each other. The labor folk, the leaders of the unions weren't talking to the leaders of the organization. We helped break that down. Kristen played a very important role in that. And then we managed a couple of significant performance improvement projects inside of that operation. And you can see the productivity over a period of about 6 months was 8.5%. Total savings, $737,400 a return, meaning everything that we spent, and then against the gain that we created, there was a 700% return. Bob Kula called me right before I was going to speak to the IABC World Conference out in Vancouver, and he talked to me and he talked to me and he kept talking to me, and I was about to speak, and I said, let me get back to you, we'll talk about it later. And he called back later and he says, I've got a location in Marshall, Missouri. I think we can help improve safety there. We went to Marshall, Missouri. We were there for about 5 months, and we reduced OSHA recordables by 50%, and also had a significant impact, 26 and 28%, on absenteeism and turnover. I was telling Carla before we talked here that oftentimes when you're going after something that's people related, like safety, other measures come along for the ride, and that's exactly what happened there. We then went to a distribution center because there was $2 million in damage in the supply chain, and much of it was in the distribution centers that they had. We went to one in Indianapolis and were able to get costs down by 65% and productivity up by 16%. The problem that they were having was that they had an incentive plan that was communicating that productivity was important. And so people were damaging packages and forklifting, running the forks into packages, and they said, pack it. Well, they get all this stuff coming back in trucks that was being returned because it was damaged. And that was the communication that was causing the problem, as that incentive plan was driving everything to the point where it was costing them a lot of money. We got that arrested within about 5 to 6 months. Courtney Reynolds was implementing Lean Six Sigma out in down in Lubbock, Texas, and it just wasn't sticking. And what they decided, it was actually the CEO who went down and visited it, and he came back and he talked to me and he talked to Courtney and said, I think we're focusing too much on the mechanics and the technical aspects, not enough on the cultural and the people aspects. And so Courtney and I went down there and we worked with the people there, and we were able to get an on-time delivery up 50%, sales up 30%, and their customer base went up because they were starting to get things on time. Anna Roach, Sarah Lee Earth Grains, bakery in Chicago, we were able to get yield loss down 18% in less than a month. That's a whole lot. Yield loss, for those who might not be familiar with that term, is for instance, let's say that you're in your kitchen at home and you're going to bake a cake, and so you've got the flour in your hand in a cup, and you're walking across the floor, and all of a sudden some of the flour falls out onto the floor. Well, that's dirty. That's I can describe it very well because it happens to be. I happen to do a lot of cooking, but the flour falls on the floor and you have to throw it away and get more flour. Well, that's yield loss. You lost what you dropped off on the floor. That's the equivalent of what was happening in the bakery, and so you can see that. These are all people in their, at the time we were working together, most of them in the last few years, in their 30s, 32-ish, 35-ish ages. And it's certainly, there are a lot of people younger and older who also, but these four here are four of the people who I've really had an enjoyable, in fact, I work with all of them still now. I get a call from Anna or Courtney or Bob or Kristen from time to time. I was out working with Kristen. She's now at OI in Toledo instead of Owens Corning in Toledo. All these people, the other thing about it is, as they started elevating the performance of the organization, they started becoming more valuable, and all of them currently today have senior vice president or vice president of corporate communication titles. All right.
All right.
Here's our next slide.
Yeah, I found those stories. Yeah, we do. This is our time for questions, but I just wanted to say that I found those stories so inspirational, Jim, when you were talking about them, not only for our customers, but I think for, myself and my Marcom team at Staffbase, because we do the same thing as our customers. We run multiple channels. We have, a lot of things in our hats on a daily basis to manage. But I think really trying to look at our business strategy and our goals and trying to make that connection, just will make us so much better and effective at what we're doing. So thank you. I'm like I said, I'm always inspired by your stories.
Oh, thank you.
I think they're going to help us get better. So anybody have questions about that, about how you can do that in your organization? Jim said he just has an open door, so feel free to write in chat here if you wish. And then if not, Jim, what are kind of the top questions that you receive from people that approach you at IABC or anywhere else?
Yeah, I think when people go back home, and I used Kristen a little bit here for that, is she goes back and went back home, and she said, I've seen some things that I didn't even know were going on in my profession or my discipline, and she pointed out to about some of the companies that we had talked to. Roger Dupree, who some of you may know, he's written 8 or 9 books on internal communication. He's sort of the guru for many years, and a very good personal friend of mine. But he was, one of the things that he was talking about at this conference that Kristen attended was the importance of making sure that your people back home understand what's going on in your discipline, in your profession, that it doesn't have to stand still, that it can be a profit center for the organization. And that I think that it's important that you go back and you say, I heard some things that were really intriguing, and explain some of the results that some of these companies are getting, and say, let me introduce you. And that's what Kristen did. Dave Brown, the CEO, had his top 50 meeting every month. And she and I came back and spoke at the top 50 meeting about what other companies are doing and what they need to do, and looked at starting small at the beginning and growing what you do. Don't try to bite off way too much. Get control over a small piece of what you can improve. Then remember what we did in Los Angeles. We started there. Then we went to Denver, and we went to Seattle. We went to Chicago, Miami, and New York. So start small, but let your leaders know that you're interested in not being a cost center anymore, but being a value creation center. They're going to love it. I mean, because it helps them make their bonus, and make more money and have better opportunities for them. So I think that's one of them. One of the things that I would do is let other people know who are important. Let other people know, and try to do a pilot, some kind of a small effort, starting with the question, where are the best opportunities to improve performance by better managing communication? Notice I didn't say where are the best opportunities to improve communication. I said where are the best opportunities to improve performance by better managing communication. Identify what that is, then identify what the root cause of the problem is. Identify what needs to happen to make that root cause go away. Start small and grow it, and you'll find yourself having a whole lot of fun, I think.
And that's good advice too, to take one bite at a time, not try to solve the whole puzzle all at once.
That's right. And make sure that the work that you're doing, start making sure that you're focusing on results, not means and process. We were talking about engagement a little bit ago. And the term engagement has become bastardized a little bit. We know what the classical definition is, and that is the willingness to do when you've got discretionary effort. It's important, though, that you don't talk about your goal as being engagement. Your goal is not engagement. That's the means toward a result that has an outcome like cost, quality, speed, whatever it may be. So be very careful about saying, well, we need to engage people. Well, you need to engage people for what? What is it you're trying to do? Is it you're trying to reduce damage in the distribution center, as Bob did? We engaged people, but we focused it laser-like on the distribution, on the damage problem. We were told that you can't affect productivity by focusing on the damage issue. And we came back with a 16% improvement in productivity and a 65% improvement in quality. So it's not about either or. You can do both at the same time if you do it right. So use engagement as a means to get someplace. But don't go to your CEO and say, we need to engage, we need to have higher employee engagement scores. It doesn't improve stock price.
Yeah, that's true. So true. All right.
Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions here.
Troy said, I love that point. What was it? Which one was it, Troy? Sadly, we don't formally, but are looking at our app to help. Well, Carla and Staffbase are going to be able to help, I can assure you. Love that point. I want to know what that point was you like.
Oh, he says, there it is. The point about engagement as a means to the end.
Good for you. Thank you for letting me reinforce that. That has become so bastardized over the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah, that is the point. The point is engagement is not what you're after.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's the means.
Well, if you have any more questions for Jim, here is his contact information. He's not a hard guy to find. He is out there constantly speaking on different topics related to our audience and to us as communicators. And then I love this quote that you sent over our way too, Jim. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Most organizations are nowhere close to getting the most from their people. We prove every day that it doesn't have to be that way. All of the organizations that I've worked with over the years are at the beginning are not particularly high performing. Some of them are. FedEx has always been a high performing organization, but many of them aren't, and many organizations aren't getting the kind of performance from their people that they can. Um, I would imagine that there is no organization, I don't care how good they are or how much ink they get, that doesn't have an opportunity to improve the performance through their people.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We have another webinar coming up next month on October the 17th, same time on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And this is for communicators that are looking to take the leap. I think it takes courage to make change. And Jason Lauritsen is going to join us. He is a former HR professional, and now he speaks and writes about employee engagement and workplace culture. And he's going to help us to be brave and discover skills for overcoming that fear and accomplishing what we're hoping to achieve. So hopefully we'll be able to measure that, Jim, and we'll be able to prove the business impact. But first, we've got to get some courage, right? So that's what that next series is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand from what I've heard that Jason is a really super guy. So I would show up for that. I think the value of having somebody like Jason is that he has that strong human resources background that is quite complementary to all the things that we need to be doing. In fact, it's hard not to cross those lines between communication and HR because
Yeah.
in most of the other divisions as well. But I would encourage you to check in with Jason. What's the date of that one?
October the 17th.
17th, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then also, if you want to sign up for a demo with us, we will share best practices from some of the customers that we talked about and walk you through our platform and talk about what your goals are and what you are hoping to achieve with a channel like ours. And Jim has offered to meet with you as well during those demos and give you some insights and just listen to your pain points and your problems and your challenges, and working together, I think, is the best way that we can help you to solve those problems and also to better our solutions so that we can meet your needs as well.
Yeah, I think Carla and I talked about this before the broadcast here, that she and Staffbase bring a wealth of help to most anybody. And you've heard some of the things that I've done, and we were talking about it'd be kind of fun if some of you would like to get together with both of us and we could talk about the opportunities that you have and where some of the issues are, and together help you address some of the, or at least what if you tried this and what if you tried that. So it might be kind of fun to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. We can form a group.
Right.
Sounds great. So, well, thank you so much for being with us today, Jim. It has been lovely to chat and to get your insights and to hear you share those with others as well. I hope that all of you that joined us today found it valuable and can take it back to your work and work with leaders and employees to make a difference moving forward.
Great.
Yes. Thank you, Jim.
Thank
We'll
you,
talk
Carla.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.